Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to present my capstone, Developing Communication Tools to Improve Community Climate Advocacy for San Diego County's Regional Decarbonization Framework. So throughout this project, I had the opportunity to connect with some really great people in the southern region of San Diego. One of the people I met was a 16-year-old student from Montgomery High School in San Ysidro. And I met her at a climate advocacy workshop, and I wanted to talk to her and see what really drew her into coming to this workshop. And she told me that she's in a health organization at her school and that her club leader said she thinks it would be a really great idea for her to go and learn how to advocate for her concerns and her priorities. So we kind of got to chatting, and I wanted to really gauge her understanding of the climate crisis and see how it affects her community and what she's noticed. And she immediately touched on air pollution and air quality within her region. And often enough, she'll have to walk to school because of unreliable transportation in the region, and she also has asthma, so that just only really adds to the burden of that. And our conversation that we had really just seemed to echo the other conversations that I had with other community members in this region of San Diego, and she was really able to paint a picture for me of the daily activities and the daily lives that they live and how this is just a part of their life, and how this is a life that under-resourced communities live. So under-resourced communities are communities that have been ignored and excluded from decision-making processes and have been deprived of the resources and support due to historical and structural neglect. And these communities are denied access to make change and reform in policy-making processes due to existing poor policy. And despite historical measures such as redlining being outlawed, there's still some lingering effects of it that can really be clearly seen due to geographic proximity to environmental pollutants, as well as low socioeconomic status of these communities. And because of that, it only really makes these communities more vulnerable to climate change. So as we're all really aware, climate change has an effect on every aspect of our lives, from our physical and mental health to our political system, the environment, our economy. And while these ramifications of climate change really do have an effect on everyone, it's a crisis that has further disadvantaged under-resourced communities, and it will continue to burden them. So these under-resourced communities are disproportionately suffering from the consequences of climate change, and climate change really just aggravates the socioeconomic inequalities, and because of that, these communities are more likely to have adverse health effects, food and water insecurity, displacement due to extreme weather events, and just exposure to environmental pollutants. So there's a significant need for these communities to have climate adaptation and mitigation, considering equity and public health issues are intersectional with climate change. And this need for addressing that can really be seen within a local community here in San Diego, within South Bay and southeastern San Diego. So in San Diego, there's 5 districts within the county, and South Bay and southeastern San Diego are situated in District 1. So within District 1, we have the cities of Chula Vista, Imperial Beach, National City, San Diego, as well as other small communities, and these communities are predominantly Latino communities. And as you can see, some communities are on the border, some lie inland, and some are close to the coast. So this region of San Diego has been overlooked and underfunded, and they really do suffer the severe consequences of climate change. So you could see along the coast, often enough, there's sea level rise and flooding that occurs. There's food insecurity, severe weather, and heat, especially in the inland areas, poor water quality. But talking with people, it seemed as though the large consensus among a lot of the community they face was air quality and air pollution. So being aware of that and these inequities in San Diego, I really wanted to look for something that could provide a solution to these communities, which is when I then came across the Regional Decarbonization Framework. So in 2021, the San Diego Regional Board of Supervisors voted to create the Regional Decarbonization Framework, RDF for short. And it's a framework that's intended to inform future actions on reducing greenhouse gas emissions in San Diego through climate action planning and collaborative pathways to implement San Diego's regional goals, as well as California's mid-century net zero goals. So this framework can really be utilized within communities like South Bay and southeastern San Diego to mitigate greenhouse gases and climate change hazards. And the RDF has 3 components, the first being the technical report, which is a scientific report written by experts to assess how we can get to net zero emissions within the region, a workforce development study, which is basically ensuring that we have green jobs throughout this process, And then the implementation playbook, which just gives advice on actions to be taken in by local organizations, the government, as well as just individuals who really want to reduce their carbon footprint. And the components of the RDF can provide insight and discussion on collaborative solutions that focus on renewable energy, fossil-free transportation, building electrification, natural climate solutions, as well as improving local food systems. So kind of going back to the disadvantages that under-resourced communities face with climate change, using the RDF as a tool to better understand how to mitigate climate change kind of brought me to the purpose of this project. So first, looking at these RDF documents, they're really great tools, they're really great resources. They can be quite lengthy, they have a little bit of jargon in it. So rather than just giving it to community members to go and read on their own when they don't have the time or capacity, I created a communication tool in the form of a story map to do so. And by providing an accessible information and actionable insights through, visual interactive tool like this, it really seeks to enable community members to advocate for climate action effectively, help them better understand the RDF and what it is, as well as leveraging recommendations based on the RDF to shape their community's future. So in addition to that, I really wanted to also create something for policymakers since they are very much so involved in the process of creating policies to tackle climate change. So I did write a white paper report that was geared towards policymakers, and a white paper report basically just addresses an issue at hand and presents solutions and recommendations based on data and evidence. And I integrated all of that with recommendations into my white paper based on the RDF. So the project process, I kind of came to a better understanding of the community and their concerns regarding climate impacts and how best to make recommendations that they can look to and advocate for, and just the ways I could communicate the RDF to them based on this process of first community outreach and data analysis, which really helped shape the way I would create my story map and white paper. And after that, just kind of reflecting on the steps that can be taken after this. So to start with community outreach, this was really the core of the project, and it helped me gauge community concerns and priorities. And that was done through presentations, workshops, meetings, and interviews, one-on-one interviews, in-depth conversations with local community members. And in addition to that, I also did receive qualitative feedback through surveys and questionnaires. And as you see on the screen, this is one of the survey questions. And it asks, have you been impacted by any of these climate and health-related issues? So allowing them to mark all that they have experienced, air quality came out to be #1, with over 80% of the respondents having been impacted by it. And following that was extreme heat and food insecurity. So in addition to having some conversations with community members, I also wanted to reach out to local organizations just to see what they've noticed. And these organizations are more local to South Bay and southeastern San Diego, and just kind of gauge what they've noticed as well. And it seems as though we have, been able to understand that there is a range of climate impacts and hazards that do affect these communities, but air pollution has been the most significant one. So in addition to that, I reached out to some elected officials just to better gauge the policy process in writing my white paper report. And I was able to meet with Mayor of Imperial Beach, Paloma Aguirre, and Escondido Councilwoman Consuelo Martinez, and they were really helpful in that process for the white paper report, but they also gave me great advice on how community members can advocate. And they both told me often enough people do come in and they will bring up their concerns and priorities, but they don't really address any solutions or data or evidence. And unfortunately, elected officials and policymakers are not experts in this field, so really providing that with them is super important so they can take any action that needs to be done. So following that, I was interested in doing more research and just looking at some data, and I found this data from California Air Resources Board, and this map shows 15 communities in California that have the poorest air quality and are also low-income communities. And as you can see, circled down below, the Portside Environmental Justice Community consists of South Bay and southeastern San Diego. So again, these are communities in California that have the poorest air pollution and they need the most help. So thinking about that, proceeding and coming into the data analysis section, I really wanted to understand how and why it seems to be such a problem here. And as you can see here, this is the asthma rates within San Diego County, highlighting that the lighter colors represent lower asthma rates and the darker greener colors represent higher asthma rates. And I found data that correlated with the land use of the area as well as the traffic congestion, and where the circle is on the map represents the heaviest traffic congestion in the county, which produces a lot of particulate matter 2.5 and diesel particulate matter, which directly impacts human respiratory and cardiovascular system, also why asthma rates are so high within this area. So overall, the data analysis portion of my project really just solidified and further affirmed the issue of air pollution in the area, just proving how much these communities really do suffer the consequences of climate change. So with the community outreach portion and data analysis section, it not only helped me understand the issue of air pollution in this region, but also really helped me identify solutions to look for. And decarbonization can provide so much positive transformation and changes to these communities. And sorry. So looking at the understanding that traffic congestion and the unreliability of public transportation is a problem here, I really wanted to focus on a solution that would be good. So thinking about how can we really ramp up public transportation, so having a multimodal public transportation system, so not only including buses, which would really add a benefit for people who are going to and from places, but including walkways as well as bike paths, just to really reduce the carbon footprint of this community. And with all that I've learned and understood from prior stages in my project, I was able to apply that to the story map that tells community members in Southern San Diego really just how to advocate for themselves and how they could advocate to elected officials and integrate the contents of the RDF as well as recommendations based on their own local community policy. And this story map is a visual and interactive tool for these communities that really gets into details and definitions of everything that's relevant for the RDF. And considering that this is targeted for people within Southern San Diego, it will also be available in Spanish and Tagalog. While Latino, the community is predominantly Latino, there's also a Filipino population, so really just wanting to consider everyone else who is involved in this process. So with my white paper report, it was geared towards policymakers, and I made recommendations that drew upon the combination of insights gathered through community outreach, data analysis, and focusing on addressing specific issues and concerns expressed by the community, and that was all integrated within the report. And these recommendations were really built upon a solid foundation of evidence-based insights, which is what I wanted to focus on, considering the information that I got from Consuelo and Paloma earlier about policymakers really just loving data and evidence and recommendations being provided for them so they can actually take these steps to do something. So the work that is done for this capstone is just really the tip of the iceberg and has served for the first step in the process, and it is by no means the final product. There's still so much to be looked at and considered to further increase climate advocacy, especially in under-resourced communities, just further investigating climate impacts experience and also taking continuous community outreach and doing continuous community outreach, just considering that climate change really is still evolving, so their problems and concerns will continue to evolve. And South Bay and Southeastern San Diego were used here as a case study, so there is a hope that this can be replicated and applied to other regions of San Diego. So I really hope that Climate Action Campaign and the County of San Diego can really replicate the work as a window into creating the right processes, just on a larger and more continuous scale, and hopefully be able to integrate some of this into a climate action plan, a county or regional climate action plan in the future, so we can actually have some real tangible change. I just really wanted to first off say thank you to everyone who's helped throughout this project. So thank you to Imperial Beach Mayor Paloma Aguirre, as well as Escondido Councilwoman Consuelo Martinez, and some folks from the county, Rimga Visconta and Martaza Baxamusa, just for guiding me through the RDF process. And just wanted to conclude by thanking my capstone committee, my committee chair, Ali Dressel, and my committee member, Corey Gabriel, for really helping, supporting, and just guiding me through this whole process. And yeah, thank you. Questions? Alex. He's coming.
It's more fun like this.
Yeah.
I guess, how do you see affordable housing factoring into this. I feel like that was something that
Yeah.
kept coming to my mind.
Yeah, definitely. Thinking about affordable housing too, especially with something like decarbonization initiatives, it's already a problem now, and it is something to be considered for the future, especially if we do have a greener, cleaner energy area. The fear of, that not of these people being displaced and being pushed out and gentrification occurring, it's more called green gentrification. So ensuring that we have affordable housing policies within this as well before we continue to go about this so we don't push anyone out of the process. I didn't look into it too much, but it is definitely something that is factored in. And a part of that survey that I presented earlier, affordable housing was a concern. It was definitely lower on the list, and not as many people responded to it, but it was still a concern. So, but definitely, I think having initial policies that will, like, if we had better, rent control policies maybe, and something like that, that would be a really good start to make sure that we don't displace anyone. Isabella.
Thank you. First of all, excellent job.
Thank you.
Secondly, when the workforce development piece came up, I started thinking, like, what does this mean for people who are maybe working in industries that are going to be impacted, and how does, like, maybe career transitions or, like, what does the outreach look like to that particular group of people who might have this, like, resistance because it means change or, like, potentially losing a job? Like, what's the plan for, I guess, aiding those
and
people?
That's a really good point, because the workforce development study, I didn't really touch on that as much. I did touch on the implementation playbook, mostly to derive things for my project. That is the whole point of it, though, is to ensure that these people who are working in, industries that are related to fossil fuel combustion, they do go through that process. So I think I can honestly continue to look into that more and get back to you on that. But that is super important, and I think that's something about, like, a behavioral change that needs to happen when we do shift into a cleaner energy society and are trying to decarbonize. So it's a part of the big picture, I think, more so. Yeah.
Hey, Amber. Fantastic job. That was awesome. Do you have any upcoming events or anything, any next steps in collaboration with Climate Action Campaign?
Yes. So this summer, I will be meeting with a councilwoman from one of the South Bay Southeastern districts just to further talk about the RDF and just to see how we can really integrate this more into the county and just kind of, like, have this be reached out more into other local organizations as well, just so we can, like, really spread it across and actually get people to look at the story map. So hopefully that works, as well as working with Climate Action Campaign, hopefully in the fall, maybe being able to, like, put this into, like, schools within the area and, really get it to the students who are clearly, suffering the consequences, and they are able to participate in, their local community still, despite them maybe not being able to vote. So really getting that point across and getting that point across that anyone can advocate for themselves. So, yeah. Anyone else? Awesome. Well, thank you so much.